We're live. Oh my
Woo!
God. Uh,
Hey,
yeah, geez. Yeah, it is really hot over here. I'm not wearing pants right now, Dave.
that's okay. I work from home, so I mean, you're speaking my language now.
I'm not going to reveal to the audience how, like, what I am wearing, because they could think I'm just naked under here or that I'm wearing underwear. Like, but I'm not going to say it's not naked though,
I'm
so it's
picturing like a
something.
like a lederhosen thing, you know?
Yeah, but it's just the with the straps undone.
Yeah,
Or are you thinking of like the ones where like the straps go to the socks, like the garters?
correct. It's scarce but tasteful, you know?
Yeah, I've got garters on my socks, and then I'm wearing a thong
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
underwear. So
beautiful.
it's nice, strong whale tail. Um, well, what's up? What's going on over there?
Oh, my kids are in bed. It's it's a roll of the dice every day, man. Because having one kid was easy. It was like the routine was just clocked in every day. And then you have two, and it's like all that shit just goes out the window. Whatever concepts you had of parenting, it's like, no, no, you don't get to do that twice. It's a completely different variable. So today was a good day. They showed mercy today, so I'm very
They, sh-
appreciative of that.
they showed mercy today.
Yeah, it's like from Gladiator. They just kind of give me a thumb and then decide.
Yeah, yeah. Maximus the Merciful. Um, so, how many kids do you have? Do you have two?
I have two. Yep,
What are their ages?
4 and 6 right now.
Yeah,
Actually, you
right
know
on.
what? I'm not gonna lie. So we'll throw an Easter egg out. They're 4 and 5. And I have that series where I tell them, yeah, I refer to them by their ages. You know, 4 did this, 6 did this. And I said 4 and 6, but people are so adamant about like, because it's the only information they have about my kids. So it's
Right.
like, they all love that. They love the number is the name thing. So they've been like adamantly following, like, you know, like someone's keeping a journal somewhere and they're like, oh my God, 4 and 6 already. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, 4 and 6. So now I've convinced myself of the lie at this point.
How invasive. I mean, because I think you're like, it's so funny. You're trying to do something like to increase the privacy of your children, like to protect your children from, like, you're trying to take measures to protect, and people are like tracking it anyway. They're like, oh no, we know exactly how old those kids are, and little do you know, I'm finding out back road information into their names. I won't say it, but I know when
Yeah.
their birthdays are.
It's like an unspoken thing. Like, I don't know what you all have figured out, and you wouldn't tell me if you did. So we'll just leave it at,
Yeah.
that's, you keep getting the numbers. That's all you get.
Yeah, somebody that followed me figured out where I lived. I don't think that they would let me know that they were like, "Hey, I found your house here on Google Maps." Like, I don't think that
Yeah. I
they
feel
would let
creepy
me.
all the time because like I'll watch people's videos and I'm sitting there like double chin going on. And I'm like, I could totally find you if I wanted to. Like, you're being a fool, you know? I'm like, you can't think like that though.
I was talking to someone at VidCon last week who said that, who was like, um, and it was a woman, and it makes more sense. She was like, "Yeah, I have to." She goes, "I'm very conscious of like what's behind me, what's in the background on my videos, like what's showing." She goes, "If somebody on the street stops me and wants to like take a photo and tag me in it, I always make sure that they don't put the location of where we are, or that if they do want to say where we are or where they saw me, that they wait till tomorrow so that I could potentially not be in that place anymore." She's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I don't think about any of that stuff. I literally tweeted out the other day, hey, I'm walking around Toluca Lake in short shorts, a cutoff sleeve sweatshirt, and a bucket hat listening to Creed. And I just like told people in real time where I was in Los Angeles and what I was wearing. So if there was someone who like hated me for my stance on abortion or something and wanted to come find me and throw down, they could have found me, you know?
But the intimidation factor upon arrival though is what saves you. Like,
Yeah, the
oh my
fact that
God.
they know I'm juiced up on the Creed.
Yeah. I've already got that fighting rock pulsing through my veins.
Yeah, they
He's
know
got the bucket hat.
I'm ready to go higher. Like
I didn't realize he was so tall in person.
I'm like, bring it on with arms wide open. Here it comes. I'm ready for it.
All right.
How many more Creed puns can I make? Let's talk about the thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about AdHid,
Mm,
which is what I'm calling it now. I
yeah.
just created that patent pending. I don't know if people already say that, but
It's the underground term. You got
Okay.
it. Nah.
All right, great. I know the lingo.
Yeah.
Now, what is ADHD? What's going on with that? What is it?
So as simply as can be explained, the front part of your brain, called the prefrontal cortex, is made up of multiple different other parts, all which control a variety of different things. Your attention span, your emotional regulation, your motivation, whether or not you have the ability to stay motivated to do things and engage with things that you don't necessarily want to do. And that portion of your brain for someone that has ADHD, I don't want to say is smaller, but it's underdeveloped, and maybe the circuitry isn't as strong in somebody else. So that portion of your brain is not as strong as somebody else's is, which causes issues with those particular things. Dopamine is the chemical that kind of is engineering all of those actions, and there is a shortage and misuse of dopamine in the brain. I said this was going to be simple. There's a part of your brain that controls how happy you are, how motivated you are, and how concentrated you are.
This feels like an ADHD description of what ADHD is.
Yeah, I was doing good, and then it went off the rails somewhere.
The intention to like keep it focused and simple and concise and succinct. There's so many things I gotta say, like, as I've been learning more about this over just the last couple of years, and mostly because of TikTok and stuff, like there are all these things that in my life I was always like, why do I have such a hard time with that? And then as I was learning more about ADHD, I was like, oh, there's so many things that seem to coincide with just my experience with school growing up, and just the way that I have no short way of saying anything. I'm a very like long-winded person, and I feel like I need to like attach as much context and detail into everything that I'm trying to explain to someone as possible. I don't, I don't know if that, but
absolutely it does.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So what about, I mean, what makes ADHD in your mind different from like having a casual inability to focus from time to time, like having an occasional inability to focus? What makes it more acute or worse? I think this is a common thing that people bump up against when they're trying to tell someone about what they have, is they're like, yeah, I have a really hard time streamlining or being task oriented for like these things. Right. People are like, oh, me too. The phrase that I learned is a bad phrase is everyone has that. Like, everybody. Yeah. What are you talking about? That's just a thing that everyone has. And
it's it's my favorite part to address, because when someone says, well, I do those things too, and I don't have ADHD, I'm like, what did you think happened to people that had any kind of neurological or developmental disorder at all? I mean, did you think that like they grew arms out of their head? Like, it's human behavior done differently. That's all. So it's the main core difference between somebody that has any kind of neurodivergency or neurological disorder or developmental disorder and just your average Joe that happens to also sometimes do those things is the intensity and frequency in which they occur. So, John may lose his keys once a week. I cannot set something down or it's gone, and it inhibits my life. It's a problem, that I have to address, because it, at first it's cute when you're younger because you do things like, oh man, what did I do with my textbook? Silly me, it's another gaffe. But now when you're older, it's things like, we have to get to your daughter's doctor appointment and you don't know where her insurance card is, even though your wife just told you where it was. This is a problem. And I think that's why you're noticing a lot of people, besides the fact that there's awareness now, that's why you're noticing a lot of people get diagnosed when they're adults, because the problems that they, have are much larger. So, when you have all of these problems when you're younger, if it's not addressed by your parents, nobody really cares because you're just a kid. But when you get older and people expect you to be responsible for your own shit, and they're like, why aren't you? You're like, yeah, why aren't I? I want to know why that is. And that's what happened to me. There was issues in the home. There was issues at work. There was issues everywhere. And I'm like, something is wrong, or I am one of the dumbest people I've ever met. And I just, not to toot my own horn, but I just don't feel like it's that second one. I just don't.
Yeah.
And that's what I found out. And it was such a relief to know, because people already know they have ADHD. They just didn't know it was ADHD. You know, they said, I know
Right.
these exact problems. I can describe you every problem I have to a T. I don't know why it's happening, but this is
Yeah.
just my life, I guess. So when they find out, it's an immediate connection. And then they go and they just binge information because they're like filling in holes from the past, 15 years of their life.
Well, that's what I was thinking too when you said people go, I have those things too, and I don't have ADHD. Is it's like, well, first of all, you don't know that you don't have ADHD. Like you maybe have never sought a diagnosis. Like, and I think you're right that it's like the intensity and frequency with which those things happen. I've met people who have like maybe experienced a panic attack in their life. They're like, I've had a panic attack. Like I remember I was 16 years old and I had a panic attack at school one day and I didn't know what was happening. And they're like in their 30s now. And that was the one time it ever happened. And I'm like, oh no, I have panic attacks a few times a week, every week. Like, and there was a time in my life where I had them almost daily. So I'm like, so there is a difference in frequency and severity, and the degree to which it inhibits your life. But like you said, you lived a long time undiagnosed, just knowing these are the symptoms or these are the problems that I'm dealing with. I don't know what it's called or if it has a name. I just know that this is what I'm living with. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that when they hear people describing this, they go like, well, I have that. I don't have ADHD. Right. It's like, well, you could very easily be undiagnosed. But that leads me into my next question. When were you diagnosed?
Within the past year, early spring, I think. I don't really know. I know it was within like the past 6 or 7 months. And it's kind of, I'm in AA and people are like, when's your sobriety date? I'm like, I don't fucking know. At sometime in summer, you know what I mean?
You don't know your sobriety date?
I just hit 3 years last month. It's June or July. Thank you. I obsessed over that stuff. And I was like, you know what, the sooner I forget it, the sooner I can just focus on big picture anyway. But, for me, it's like once I found out, I was almost resentful because I was like, someone had told me, they said, forgetfulness can only be a personality trait for so long, Dave. And that one like really had me miffed because I was like, this is not ideal for me. I don't enjoy the fact that I'll go lay down in bed and get back up because I think I locked the door and then go lay down in bed and get up because I think I locked it. I don't like that. So it's not ideal.
I was driving to Utah recently and I could not get the thought out of my head that I left my front door wide open. So I do this thing when I pack my car for a trip where I just leave the door to the apartment open because I'm coming back and forth with loads of things in my arms to take to the car. And I don't want to have to open the door with my arms full every time I go. But I was like an hour out of town and I was like, I can't get this idea out of my head that I just walked out of my apartment with the door open. So I had to call one of my friends in LA and be like, can you please go over to my apartment and just look at it and tell me that the door's closed. Like, right.
I would be less irritated if I wasn't wrong only like half the time. If I was wrong every time, I'm like, great, I remembered, now I'll go fix it. Or, I'm never wrong, I don't have to fix it. But it's like, I have no clue. I have no idea what's, if my assumption is correct or not. So now I have to check.
Right. So being aware of this thing and being aware that it's something that I could have been living most of my life with undiagnosed, and, getting that awareness from the internet has definitely led me to trying new habits out and stuff that I've been learning from people on the internet. Like you were saying, like for the longest time, I also have not been able to set something down. So like, I always call it that, like, it feels like my subconscious brain is literally trying to hide things from me. Yeah. Like when I finally find the thing, it's like, who in my head thought that the keys should be placed inside this shoe? Like thought that like, I know where I'll remember that I put the keys is inside this shoe. Yeah. Like which at some point, some part of my brain was like, this is a safe little pocket for me to put something like that. But like, whenever I find them, it's like, so I consciously or unconsciously at some point hid this thing. I schemed. I hid this thing. So now I have a key hook that is where my keys go the second I come inside the house. If they don't go there, then they're lost. If they
Right.
if they don't make it to the key hook, then I don't know where they are. But there's like a set place for, and people have been telling me to do this for years too. They've been like, have a bowl, have like a bowl where your wallet keys
A
and
station.
whatever
Yeah.
goes right in those when you come in. I'm like, and I'm finally starting to do it, but I still like, if I go to that key hook to leave the apartment and the keys aren't there, I don't know where they are.
Yeah, I've got a little station and I use it mostly, but there's this weird pocket where you can, if the spot is like too common, you won't consider it an option. But if it's too peculiar, you'll never remember where it was. So you have like, it can't be on the table. I'll never check the table. But if I put it inside of my shoe, then we're done for. So it has to be something in the middle there. That's why I like have this like peculiar little. Most of the little things that you can do holistically with ADHD are going to be brain training. And I can already tell anyone that's listening, somebody out there said, oh my God, he's going to talk about brain training, because nobody wants to hear that. We see the app advertisements that are like, play this game to train your brain. And people are like, it's all up here. You just have to think harder. And it's not like that. ADHD is not some weird gremlin that is attached to you. It's who you are. It's the way your brain is formed. It's the way it functions. It has just as many pros and cons as somebody that doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah.
So for someone that didn't have ADHD to say, my brain, it just works so exactly the way it's supposed to. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information. That would be silly. So we can't view ourselves the same way and think that it's like extra work to do things that are catered to us. It's just the way that we live our lives. And there's so many things that people can do that are so simple that would make their lives easier. Olfactory senses, smelling things and tasting things. People are like, I have an issue with motivation. I don't want to do things around the house. I'm like, put your shoes on. Put your shoes on. Your brain says, we got shit to do. We have places to go. That's what you do when you put shoes on. You go places. So if you're not moving around the house, go put your shoes on and see how long you sit on the couch with shoes on. Just sitting here before you realize you need to get up and go do something. I have cologne. Some cologne is dedicated to feeling like a boss when I want to go somewhere and I want to feel confident, where I might feel more neurotic or timid. I have smells, sights, sounds, shoes that I wear, clothing that I wear that's all associated with certain things. So when I put them on, it's not some magic trick, but it's just one more thing that's inclined towards the way that I am, that says, this is what we're doing now. This is how we're going to do it. We have to produce dopamine on our own. So I try to create little environments that do that. There's so much little stuff people can do that I think they're overlooking. Because even if they take medication, medication is just fuel for your car. But if you're not pressing the gas pedal, it's not going to matter. It produces dopamine for you, but mentally, on the personal side of things, you still have to put forth the effort that is now being given to you by these medications.
I like that you have to, medication works best in conjunction with action, with also like proactive habits, that these two, it's not just brain training or just meds. They ideally work best in conjunction with each other. It's kind of, you're in AA. A lot of people say the same thing about AA, that it's like, this works best in conjunction with therapy. Like you shouldn't be, like it's good to have a 12-step program that you're working, but in conjunction with, you should also be seeking therapy if you can, and maybe even looking into getting medicated for certain things, for things that you were treating with drugs and alcohol and stuff. I want to address really quickly, John on YouTube said, can I watch this back later? I can't YouTube well, and it's 2 a.m. here, and I need to sleep. My ADHD meds are about to wear off. You can absolutely watch this back later, John. That we're live streaming it right now, but it will be on my YouTube page later. I don't know if you're still here, but you can watch it later. It will live on YouTube. I don't know if the listeners on Spotify know that either. Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, that there's also a video version now on YouTube. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, so you talked about being diagnosed within the last year. How did that come about? Were you also like me? Did you start to learn more about this via the internet?
Yes. And 100% from TikTok only. And it's one of the reasons why I have such resentment towards people that there's people on the app that talk down about mental health creators. There's people outside of the app that talk down about, ADHD on TikTok because it is a fad right now. It's a fad because it's just popular to talk about because it hasn't been talked about before, and people like to be able to talk about it now. So yes, it is a fad. I'm not refuting that. But again, I think we've talked about this before. You shouldn't diagnose yourself through TikTok. But if you hear information over and over and over in different forms and say, that sounds a hell of a lot like me, and then you go talk to a professional and they say, that does sound a lot like you, I think that is you, that is a success. It doesn't matter that it was derived from an app. That's just the way that it is. You have to receive your information somehow. I mean, there are resources out there, but nobody out there in their right mind. I mean, unless you're like a hypochondriac, no one's out there Googling, I wonder what social anxiety is. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to the CDC to look up information about, obsessive compulsive disorder. They're not doing that. So they have to get the information from somewhere. And if it's viable to you, get your answers.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I wanted to talk about this, how TikTok was sort of this thing. It seems like there's been this groundswell of people discovering that this might be a thing that they struggle with from TikTok. Like it became sort of a niche. It became sort of a whole entire channel, a section of TikTok. As we know, as people who operate on TikTok, we know that there's sections for everything. There's sections for people who are really into stones and crystals and things like that. There's sections for people who do witchcraft. There's entire channels and sections for Trumpers. There's the whole Gen Z side of TikTok, which I'm too old and out of touch to understand.
They won't even let me in.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I'm not even aware of it. When I was at VidCon, seeing the Gen Z people, I was like, oh, you guys are on it. You're doing a whole different thing that I'm not even. I don't know what that is. But there is this sort of backlash that we're seeing, where I don't know, and it almost feels like the call is coming from inside the house. So this is what I want to talk about a little bit. Like, why do you think there's this sort of gatekeeping? It almost feels like there's like people who are like the OGers who are like, I was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. I've been living with this my whole life. And all of a sudden now a few creators on the internet are talking about it and you all think you have it all of a sudden. Like, what do you think the resistance is? Because to me, whether or not someone else feels like they have panic disorder doesn't really affect my experience with my panic disorder. Like if someone else wants to feel like they identify with a list of symptoms that I think I have, I don't know what that takes away from my experience, but I've seen this thing where people feel like they're like frustrated with the amount of people who are discovering that they might have ADHD from the internet. What are your thoughts on that? Like, why do you think that's happening?
I think a lot of it comes from a good place. I understand why they feel the way that they feel. Mostly because it's like if you spent your life learning how to make pottery and then you go out to your arts fair and you set up, and then some guy just like has like these shitty replicas that he got from China and they're just like selling like hotcakes. And you're like, what? What do you do? Like, look, I put my whole life's work into figuring out how to do this properly, and you don't even know what that is. I mean, that's like 99-cent shit, and you're just buying it. And I feel like it's the same way. It's very personal for a lot of people. I mean, it was personal for me. I was being, attacked is a strong word, but I was being mildly accosted for the way that I was behaving and acting or not behaving even. And when I found that information out, it was like this huge explosion. In my world of realizing that I wasn't broken, I was just different. And then I got into the social media world with doing the content, and I was new. I was newer than everybody else. You know what I mean? I was just getting on the scene, and luckily nobody, I felt like I always tried to provide factual information, or if it was anecdotal, it was my experience, not a universal experience, but nobody really came at me that way. But even as new as I am, somebody new else just came onto the scene, and I watched their video and I was like, that was a good video. I like their ADHD content. And then part of my brain was like, where do they come from? Why are they here? what do they know about ADHD? I'm like, why are we thinking that? Because again, it's because once you become assimilated, you feel like you kind of have to guard the lines. There are people out there who are capitalizing from mental health with just shitty information. It's just not good. It's not true. It's all made up. I've seen it. It's not a majority. It's a
You feel
very
like these are
small
like what
population of
people who
them.
are like pushing MLM products or like they have their own personal practice or own maybe multi-level marketing business that they're trying to push like I don't know, essential oils or something to cure ADHD. Is that what you're seeing or?
Sometimes I'm gonna tread on that really lightly because I
Sure.
know so many good creators that are coaches, or like my Matt Rakelboom runs a whole social media platform that is dedicated to ADHD, and he has licensed professionals, psychologists and things that come onto the platform and do Q&A sessions and stuff. That's a legit functioning system that he has that he charges for, to maintain. But there are people out there that just make up a bunch of nonsense and say, here's a starter course to learn about ADHD for $300. And by the way, if you have these things, you probably have ADHD. So that does exist. There's a lot of little microscopic niches of things that shouldn't be when it comes to mental health. Misinformation, predatory niceness in order to sell products. They tell you one of the first things you should do, if you're learning about mental health from a creator, one of the first things you should do is how often do they tell you to buy something, versus not just ads, but buy my thing that's going to help you do this. I mean, there's a lot of people out there selling, what are they called? We used to just call them natural supplements. Now they have a different name for them, but there are people out there selling supplements online, that say this will help with your ADHD. It was a big craze a while back where we were selling like lion's mane mushroom powder, and this stuff came from Japan, and it boosts all these amino acids in your brain. Just nonsense. But again, it's such a small portion of what's happening in the mental health community. I think a larger portion of the issue is just people spreading misinformation with good intentions. They think they know what they're talking about, and they don't. I just stay away from shit that I don't know until I know it. If I think of a video and I say, wow, that's a pretty strong correlation, I want to go see if there's any validity to that, because it's my biggest fear for someone to like share my video and be like, look how wrong this guy is. He's so wrong. His information is horrible. I don't want that.
Right.
I try to negate that. It's a hyper inflated sense of protection from people for a very small portion of the population. Anyone that cares about mental health will eventually learn information and be able to weed them out themselves. I've known about ADHD. I've known about it for a while, but I've known about actual ADHD less than a year, and I can spot someone spewing misinformation like that now.
Yeah.
It's an issue, but I don't think it's as big of an issue as they think it is. It's just when you're in a community, you feel like that's your obligation, and no one told you to make it your obligation. That's for anything, I think.
Yeah, I think that Austin over here on the YouTube stream makes a good point, saying, I think some people might feel like it's a, in quotes, fad to say you have ADHD. People that really struggle with it might feel like their experience is being delegitimized. Is that what you think is sort of the pushback against it? Is that like everyone goes, oh yeah, that's me. Yeah, me too. And then when everyone says it, it's sort of like it I don't know, it
Yeah.
delegitimizes it for people. It makes it.
There would be nothing worse than, if I was like at a bowling alley and there was like a group of teenage girls next to me and they're like, oh my God, it's my ADHD. And they're like, I have ADHD too. And they're like, oh, we all have ADHD. That would not be enjoyable for me. From an emotional standpoint, but ultimately, like you said, it doesn't affect me at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because my question would be, what if they all did? Like, what if they all? Because I get like my question is like, what if we found out that every person in the world actually does have it, and they all have it on a spectrum, and they all like and it's and like let's fast forward 20, 30 years as we progress the science on it, that it's like, oh, it's actually like I don't know, like let's just say, like, would that delegitimize it if more people had it?
No, in my opinion, no.
Yeah.
But again, I think people people will always relate exclusivity to value in some sense, even obviously like material things, that's important, but specifically within like groups and communities, that's really important, because the more people that are involved, it's like when a new band comes out, nobody likes it when people start listening to the same band because now they're not cool anymore. Why? I don't know. It's just not. It's just the way that that person feels. I understand where they're trying to come from, where they say, you know, all of these people are saying that they have it, but they don't. And like you said, you don't even know if that's true. But assuming you are true, assuming you're correct, and they don't have it, you investigated correctly that they don't actually have it. What's the next problem for you? And I feel like if I were to ask people, they would say, well, it's, you know, all of these people think they have ADHD because they were diagnosed from TikTok, and now it's clogging up the healthcare system with a bunch of people. And that's fair, because there is right now. I mean, if you go to try and get a diagnosis for ADHD, they're like, huh, we'll see you in, you know, February next year. So that's a legitimate problem. But again, if every person that goes and gets a diagnosis is confirmed, then what's the problem?
Right. Like if we're just finding out that it's a very underdiagnosed thing, that it's actually more prevalent than we initially thought. Like I understand, like, so this was the debate that I had a while back. I made a video about ADHD, and the, you know, it's one of those situations where there were like 13,000 comments on the video, and the overwhelming majority of comments were supportive and were people saying like, this, thanks for making this, that I found this validating, I found this like helpful. But there were enough people, I'd say there were in the neighborhood of like 50 to 100 people who were very upset, who felt like I was not talking about it in the right way. And they were saying things like, you know, people like you make my experience less legitimate, that like you just make everyone think that, oh, anyone can have it, it's just, you know. And I was like, at the time I was thinking, well, but like, who are you to say whether or not someone has it? And they brought up that argument that, well, if everyone thinks they have it, then there's less of there's less portions of the pie of mental health resources to go around to people who actually have it. But my problem with that was, and still is, like, how do we determine who actually has it? Like you said, if all these people who are in line for a diagnosis go and get tested and are diagnosed, how do we prioritize whose case deserves? Is it like a first come first serve thing? Like well, I was here first. Like I got diagnosed before you, therefore I deserve proprietary care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, it's one of the few valid points that I hear is that they're clogging up the system, and that's fair. I clogged up the system. I was in there clogging up the system for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, the number one way to have your budget cut for your department is not spend it. So in my mind, you know, we want to spread awareness, but not too much awareness. We want to make sure that everybody gets their diagnosis, but we don't want everybody to try and get their diagnosis. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
You wanted this. We all wanted this. We wanted to spread awareness. We're still doing it now. We're still making the content now. Right. You know, it's social media. Just because it's something as sovereign as mental health, I mean, that didn't save civil rights from getting a bunch of trolls making videos. I mean, that in my opinion has far more gravity than, you know, what mental health is going through. So of course you're going to have that come with the territory. If you're going to make content about it and everyone's going to say, this is a great idea, this is a great way for all of us to spread awareness, help other people, and make some money, you're going to have that happen. Yeah. You're going to blow up, and now this is going to be a part of it. But again, I think it's going somewhere. You know what I mean? If you ask me, if people going to get diagnoses that maybe shouldn't have diagnoses is going to be a problem that balloons into the total failure of you know, ADHD healthcare, no. It sounds like it's just going to be inconvenient for a while until people don't care about it, and then you can go back to what you were doing. But it's one of the most, it's the most well-known developmental disorders, neurological disorders that has been researched. We know more about it than most any other condition. We did not know as much about it in 1975. you know, and I'm sure that everyone in 1975 that did have it had a lot of convictions and a lot of opinions about the way things were, and people that, you know, I'm sure they were having some version of this conversation that we're having then. So knowing that you have changed so much, the landscape of this condition has changed so much between, you know, its conception to now. How can you say things with such, you know, judgmental tone, knowing that whatever you know now is in no way going to be the same in, you know, 2090, you know?
Yeah. So I think something that I noticed, so the situation that I was in, and I think you remember, I talked to you when it happened, but I did one of my songs, and it was a song that was based on my own personal experience, which was on TikTok. As I was scrolling at some point in like 2020, I came across the ADHD niche of creators, and you were one of them that I came across. Like at some point I came across your videos, and there were people that made me go, and I was watching more and more about it, and watching different mental health professionals talking about it on TikTok, and going, oh my God, this sounds so much like what I've been dealing with my whole life and not been able to put my finger on. And as I got more into it, all of a sudden I was like, geez, does everybody have this? Because every creator, all of a sudden it seemed like it's sort of that effect of like when you buy a car and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, you know, or the first time you learn a new word and like you've never heard a word before, you hear that word in a conversation, you look it up, and then like later that week you hear the word in like 5 different conversations. Right. Like I'd never heard that word before, and that's how it felt. It was like all of a sudden everywhere I looked, everyone had ADHD that I was coming across, and it didn't bother me either. And I wrote a song called "Everybody Has ADHD" about like this sort of groundswell of people discovering they might have ADHD from the internet. Little did I know that phrase, everybody has ADHD, for a lot of people who have been diagnosed from an early age or who have been struggling with it for their whole life, that kind of phrasing has been used in their mind to invalidate their experience, where they, as a kid, they would explain to someone what they have and their friends would go like, everybody has that. Or some adult would be like, oh, come on, you're a kid. Every kid has a heart, you know? So I was using the phrase saying, everywhere I'm looking right now, it looks like everyone that I'm engaging with has ADHD. What they were hearing is this phrase that was said to them like, everybody has a hard time focusing. You're not special. You don't have some special thing that needs to be treated with doctors and medicine, like, you know. And we were saying 2 different things, but, you know, and I very much so appreciate and respect that language matters. But I think what I was going to say is, what I discovered about this community is that there is like a strong, there is a strong community here. There's like a set of rules, and there's language parameters. Like I didn't expect it to be so much of like language parameters in the same way that like the LGBTQIA community has language parameters, and like and the other marginalized groups have language rules. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to find that. So like I was so taken off guard that I was like, oh, my experience with mental health is that it's very like personal, and that like my experience with it is not necessarily someone else's experience with it. And I've never really seen the need to sort of like come up with uniform language to describe our shared experience, because even if we have shared symptoms, we're still going to have like unique ways of processing it and dealing with it. And again, like I said, when I released this video, the overwhelming majority of comments were positive. It was just a handful of people that were like, you can't say that. Wound up taking the video down. But I guess I wonder how much you've learned about that, because it sounds like you've actually learned more about like the language. Like I hadn't heard the phrase brain training until you talked to me, until this conversation right now. So what have you learned in the last year or so on the internet, just as far as like best practices language wise and stuff with this community?
So
that's a lot of stuff that I just said.
Yeah, so. Well, I have an answer for you, but this episode's going to come out and they're going to be like, man, we are so excited for Brave Dave to like, you know, lift up ADHD. And it sounds like all he did was bitch and moan about it for an hour, but that's, I
hope that's not what's going on. I hope
no, absolutely not. But I think there's important things that need addressed that nobody else wants to talk about, because we're not in a TikTok video comment section right now, so we can actually
Yeah.
have a conversation about this.
Right.
The thing that you will see people get on people for all the time is somebody, they're usually older, in their 30s or 40s, and they will say, I have ADD. I've had ADD since I was 10. It was called ADD when they were 10. And now, they decided that attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder were one and the same on a spectrum, one, the other, or both. And it was all ADHD. If someone says ADD, everyone just rushes. It's not ADD anymore. It's ADHD. And you'll notice they don't do that with much else because it's simple. They've all learned it and they know it's a faux pas now. So I think there is like this little burst of adrenaline and dopamine to be able to go in and say, I know this and you don't, and I'm going to teach you because you need to be taught. It's not ADD, it's ADHD. And I'm like, I understand. It doesn't fucking matter, dude. It really doesn't. They were trying to relate and say that they understood where you're coming from. They've had ADHD longer than you have, fool.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they've been diagnosed longer. They've been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you're trying to, and again, I get it. We want to make sure that we clear out old stigmas, out with the old, in with the new. But it's like everyone is so preoccupied to make sure that we lock in stuff that's less important than what we're trying to talk about. Yeah. Because they've learned it and now they're ahead of the game. And I feel like that's what a majority of mental health stuff is. I'm pansexual. I was bisexual for a long time. And then someone said, you're bisexual? And I said, yeah. And they said, so what? You wouldn't like date a trans person? You wouldn't like go out with this person? I'm like, what does that even mean? Because I was young. And they were like, pansexual means that you like anybody just because of who they are. And it's like, well, I guess that's what I am. I didn't know. Sure. I'm in that community and I still got in trouble, Yeah. And it's, again, people take
the term that you thought was correct or that best defined you and you adapted.
Yeah. And now that's just what I am, I guess. But people take the little things that they learn and try to, it's such a small portion of what's happening. It just happens to be the squeakiest wheel, which is the only reason I'm talking about it. It's one of the few problems that we're experiencing, which is elitism and mental health. And again, I think it's a fear of, incurring this self-prophecy of everybody has ADHD. Oh shit, everybody has ADHD. What do we do now? You know what I mean? It's like what they said was true and everyone's rushing into it. And now those people are being proved right. And that's what they fear. And I get that.
I think that, it's like that old, so that it's triggering something that they might not even fully understand, which is like when I was a kid and it was more rare or not as many of my friends had a diagnosis. But this is what I worry about. And again, this is where I'm like, I don't want this conversation to sound like we're shitting on the community, but like my trigger response when those people were getting upset with me was like, this sounds to me like you used to have a thing that made you special and that made you unique, and finding out that more people have it or might have it makes you feel like you're losing your grip on and I don't want to say that that's what it is, but like part of me was, it was my attempt to try to understand like, why is this gatekeeping happening? And I think that that's a more probably compassionate position. What you have is like that it just triggers this, there's this thing that they were told when they were younger that made them feel like people were trying to invalidate their experience. And now that it's being recontextualized to actually more people probably have it than we initially realized. It's probably a lot more common than we realized, and it's probably very underdiagnosed. And that, like you said, I don't want those people to be right though. All those people that said that I don't have like this very particular thing. It's like, well, no, you still have it. You still have it. So they're not right in trying to invalidate your experience. Your experience is still valid. It's just that we are finding out that it might be more of a common thing than once was thought. Like you said, it's in the last 50 years, we just keep learning exponentially more and more about it. And surely, 20 to 30 years down the road from now, we'll know even more if we're not all underwater by then.
I can't speak for other countries, but it's very America to have this happen, which is you have two enormous groups of people in this instance. I mean, it happens with, liberals and Democrats and far rights and Republicans. And it happens here too. You have a lot of people with ADHD and you have a lot of people that don't have ADHD. And for the most part, they're between the spectrum of, I don't really care what else is going on. This is just who I am, and that is what it is. And then you have other people that are like, I'm happy that people are learning about themselves, and that's great. And I hope that no one doesn't get diagnosed that shouldn't be diagnosed. They're all generally timid people. You're just placid. They don't really care what's happening. And it's this tiny little groups that have now inflated something that is small into something that is large. And now everybody's had to get involved. This whole, right-wing Nazi versus libtard thing was not a thing 10 years ago. And then it just slowly became little frictions between these crazy people. And it doesn't surprise me at all to see that happening in mental health now, where you have I don't want to say that it's kind of still the same alignment there, but it kind of is, where people are like, that's a bunch of hokey, all of this mental health stuff. And then the other people are like, no, it's very serious, and I will attack you if you get close to me and my condition and the people that have it. And everyone else is like, why are we making such a big deal?
Yeah. I mean, it's the example I gave, that video where it's like the vast majority of commenters were like, oh no, I love this. This is funny. I have ADHD and this made me laugh. I thought, and the vast majority of people who saw it were like, yeah, I liked this. That's good, and then it was just this handful of people, but they were loud enough that it scared me into being I was like, well, I don't, what happened too is there was a reasonably big ADHD creator who that's what he does, and he's a person of color, and he made a video talking about, he was really upset with me, and since I didn't concede to hit the points that he was making, I felt like he was misunderstanding what I was saying in the video. Since I didn't concede, it became a thing where I wasn't taking the call in from a person of color, so I was this white privileged guy who wasn't being open to being called in or to being corrected and I was like, man, how did this become about that? That shouldn't be what this is. That shouldn't be what this situation is. But just so something that's not even related, and it just kind of spiraled and got bigger than I felt like it was, and bigger than I felt like it was worth. And that's why I deleted the video. Overall, I still stand behind the video for the most part. I'm like, yeah, I think that I think if it's taken in the spirit that it was offered, where I'm talking about as being a full-grown adult who's discovering for the first time in his life that he might have this thing too, and looking around realizing oh my God, it's everywhere. It's everywhere I look, and sort of, but not using it to invalidate anyone else's experience or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, something that kept happening and that kept coming up during this experience, and I wonder what you can say about this is, and I'm probably going to get the terminology wrong, but there's something about hypersensitivity or extra sensitivity or something you know what I'm talking about?
So sensory disorders. Yep. Hypersensitive. So a lot of people, it's a lot of intake stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so auditory processing disorders are really common for people with ADHD, where it can go one of two ways. It can be an issue where if there's too much sound, you basically have a meltdown. And the way I describe it to people is, have you ever been in a busy city that maybe you didn't know the roads very well, and your buddy had the music at 46, and you're like, dude, this is I need to turn this down so I can see better.
Yes.
It's that, but everywhere. That sensation of something has to be eliminated or I'm gonna pop is really common with auditory processing issues. But it can go the other way as well. I feel like I do a very good job of kind of managing my intake of senses, because I don't know, it's just something that I'm adept at as opposed to something else. But I have a lot of issues hearing and understanding people, and it's to an embarrassing extent. I wear these headphones, and the whole time I'm making sure I hear every word you say, because I'll get to the point where someone will tell me something, and everybody does this. Everyone has this kind of goof where they, somebody says something 3 times, and they're like, I'm just gonna pretend I heard what they said, but that's 80% of my conversations. So it's frustrating, but again, there's so many little things that you can do that you just don't know until you know. That's why I'm so for the education from TikTok, because if you retrieve a little bit of information and you think that refers to me, I'm going to go find out more. Oh, it looks like ADHD and auditory processing issues, sensory issues are part of the same thing. So I'm going to learn more about that. And then you learn more about that and you realize that there are tricks you can use. And all of a sudden you go from TikTok to being able to have more functioning conversations.
Yeah.
That's why I don't care about what's happening there, because that train of thought eventually leads people on the right path. I got diagnosed because of TikTok, and people message me because they got diagnosed because of my TikToks. And I just heard about somebody that started doing ADHD content because I was. And eventually they will get someone to get diagnosed. So yeah,
And
everybody might have ADHD, but I really don't care. That's a good feeling for me. I could get canceled today and I'm good to go.
I like that. And I'm glad we did talk about auditory sensitivity and things like that, sensory overload. I should have looked up the term before we began the conversation. I knew there was a term for it.
Right.
It's rejection sensitive dysphoria is what I was talking about particularly. So in this situation where my ego, like I was feeling rejected by this community that I was trying to endear myself to, and they were also feeling rejected by. It was like this kind of feedback loop of like this handful of creators who were telling me that their RSD, their rejection sensitive dysphoria, was being triggered by my video, and I was feeling like, yeah, but your backlash is triggering that in me. So
no, after you.
That's what exactly. Yeah. So
yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that, about rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It really does. It's funny because there's so many things that that particular thing causes, like morality issues in my life. I have this people-pleasing tendency. People-pleasing is obviously really common with RSD.
Name
to the point that
that's the name of
to
this
a
podcast.
fault.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got it. I mean, this is it's the foundation. You're already aware. To the point, like to a fault. I've become much better about it now, where I'm much more, adhered to my own opinions and convictions and stand up for what I believe is right. But I mean, it's like I have anxiety anyway, which is a great anxiety and ADHD play together fantastic. I mean, it's a great combo. I constantly hear things that I don't approve of. And in today's day and age, where I am trying my best to make sure that I am a proper ally for anybody that I need to be an ally for, to have like this overwhelming fear to, somebody like tells a joke they shouldn't have told. And my initial thought is, get him. Let him know you're not okay with that. You know what I mean? And then it just doesn't happen. And I'm like, you failed your, the communities you're trying to be an ally for. You failed them because you have this like fear of people not liking you. And, it's like, what are you going to do? Just never talk to this person again? And my brain is like, that's right. We're never going to talk to him again. But it just doesn't happen. And, things like that, where it's like, as a person, I have morals and convictions that I stand by and I try and support whenever I can. And the fear of conflict in general is so strong that it's like a manual override button on so much stuff that I would do differently. But it's getting better. It's better.
It's a really hard thing for a creator to have, for a person who's going to be like publicly visible on the internet, stating opinions about things, or like having like a take on things, having so again, this is another one of those things that people will be like, nobody likes rejection. Everybody has rejection sensitivity. What are you talking about? That you have some special thing because you don't like rejection. Nobody likes it, but it's like, no, I mean, so the term dysphoria it's a great term that means hard to bear. Like that it means specifically that like you can be caused like physical pain by the feeling of upsetting even one person. And literally, like, I have so many friends that constantly ask me like, how come you have such a hard time with comments? Like, how come, like, just post the video and then let it go? And I think it's that rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, that it's like the idea, again, that even if I have 500 comments on a video and 499 of them are saying, I loved this video, thanks for making it, and one is saying, fuck you for this video, I hate this guy in this video, that one is going to like cause me physical pain throughout the day, you know? And so it's a hell of a thing to have when you're putting yourself out there publicly on the internet.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like, you think you get better at it, but I don't know what's happening. Either we're getting better at it or we're just becoming smarter and find better ways of avoiding it. You know what I mean? I mean, I feel bad because I used to respond. I mean, back when I had like 5,000 followers, I'm answering every comment, every single one. And now it's like, I'm trying to get like 5 in a video, and then I'll realize that I haven't answered comments like for 2 videos in a row. I'm like, I'll go get in there. I'll go respond to some video. And I have had a lot of revelations recently regarding people that don't like me. It's getting better. It really is. I made a video thanking single moms on Father's Day. I was like, you're doing the work of 2 people. Just to let you know, you're in the club. We got your back. And oh my goodness, they just crawled out of the wood. Well, what about single dads on Mother's Day? I'm like, I'm not a mom. I can't invite them to Mother's Day. It doesn't really work like that. They're like, well, you can't invite them to Father's Day either. I'm like, you know what? This has just been one big hot mess. So I'm going to make a song about you. That's what I do. I TikTok people now, you know, I never do it directly. I'm like, your foulness in general has now sparked creativity. And I mean, you do it in cascading fashion, one after the other.
That's why helpful. I make those videos where I'm talking to myself. Is like that's how I deal with the people who are like so upset with me, or you know, the people that I see, like the repeated things that I see in my comment section. Like one of the ways to deal with it for me is like to turn it into something creative, to make something cathartic for the experience that I'm having. But like I totally know what you mean, that you're like, I made something with the best of intentions. I was just trying to make people smile. You know, with the ADHD video, I'm like, I was just trying to make people laugh. I was just trying to like, I really thought of all the videos that I make, of all the topics that I cover, I never thought that would be the one that would be like
like top 5 most wanted.
Yeah. I just was like, wow,
right.
He wasn't expecting it. But again, it's like my expectation for all of my videos is that everyone that sees it is going to perfectly understand me, is going to perfectly understand what I meant and perfectly understand what I was saying, and but like, that's never been the case.
Yeah.
In 2.5 years of posting daily, it's never been the case that I've ever made a video that was 100% understood by every single person that watched it, and was 100% liked by every person that watched it. And so, yeah, I agree with you that like I am having lots of revelations through that. And I think, getting better at it and finding tools, but it's still like, it still gets me. It's still, I mean, this weekend in particular, talking about the Roe v. Wade decision has been like, it's been hard to not be affected by the comments.
Yeah.
You know?
I got lucky. I had one person. And the thing is, it's like, I made a decision, and this is not in any relation to you choosing to say something about it, but I made the decision that there was just enough guys talking about it. You know what I mean? Not that too many, I don't know, but there was just enough. There was enough. Okay. My voice was just not needed. I didn't need to contribute anything. You know, I'm supporting my wife the best way I can support my wife. I'm sharing and reposting the videos from female creators, Black female creators that I think, you know, speak volumes to what is happening. And I'm just going to try to not take up a bunch of elbow room. I'm not going to post 4 or 5 videos a day. I'm going to make 1 video a day because this is my livelihood. I have to make money from this, or, you know, I can't pay rent. So I'll post 1 video a day. I'll try and be consistent. I'll try and be funny. I won't do anything too serious, just so people have some sort of cushion because the 9th one in a row, it starts to really wear down on you, you know, and I'll try and do that. And everybody loved everything I did. And then one guy was like, it's amazing how all this can be happening around you, and this is what you choose to do with your time. And I'm like, there's always one. There's always one, you know? Yeah. And I started to do something with it, and I just deleted it. I blocked him, I deleted it. And it's you know, someone told me, you know, I don't understand why you struggle so much with trolls when you have the ability to just Thanos them away. And I'm like, you know what, that's true. But there's a lot of them.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I did the thing for a while where I just blocked every single comment that I saw that I didn't like. I just was like, you're blocked, you're out. Wasn't like, I'm not even going to bother like getting into a conversation with you or trying to see, like, I'm just, you're out, you know?
Yeah.
But that took up a lot of energy. That was a lot of like, that was hard. So then it was like, let me just not think about them. But then it's like, oh, but those people they can report stuff. Those people can get you community guidelines. But there's like liabilities there. I'm glad I did. There was a certain video I was going to make, and in hearing your story of has validated me not making this video. So when I went to VidCon over the weekend, there was a lot of particularly white male creators that were coming up to me and saying things like, and these are people with a much bigger presence than me on the internet. People who have 10, 15 million followers that were saying things like, hey, just between you and me, I love everything that you say politically. Like, I wish I could talk about that stuff on my page, but I'm glad that you do. And and this was like on Friday when the decision happened. And I was like, kind of annoyed. I was like, well, why don't you? I don't get, like, what are you afraid that like a few million of your followers are going to be upset at you for taking a stand? Like, why don't you? I think people could want to hear from you. So I had the exact opposite thought that you had, where you were like, I think there's enough men talking. I was like, I don't think there is. I want to see more of my white male friends who have the privilege to not have to care about a decision that only affects people with uteruses, or who also have the privilege to not have as bad of backlash as other people get, as people in marginalized communities get. Why aren't they speaking up? And I almost made a video being like, hey, where are you? Speak up. And then I had this thought, and I'm glad I didn't make the video, where I was like, everyone processes in their own way. Everyone is doing their best, and everyone like you reposting videos from Black female creators that are saying who are covering it, that's enough. Like, you are under no obligation to show up in any specific kind of way. Like, there's no reason why my approach is the correct approach, and I think that's part of it too, is like understanding that I'm just doing what I do. I'm showing up in the way that makes sense to me, and I don't have the market cornered on like the correct way to show up, the correct way to be an advocate, the correct way to be an ally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm actually glad hearing your story to be like, yeah, exactly, Austin. Like, not everyone needs to be, and I understand that there's all kinds of different reasons why people also don't speak up about certain things, and it's personal, and it's just like that. People's content is their personal expression, and they have the right to utilize the tool of their platform in whichever way they think will be most effective.
Right. And then there'll be backlash from somebody. For, like I said, I got backlash because I did nothing. I would have had backlash if I said something. And it's the more that I thought about, the more I tried to remember what it was like when I never created content and I was just a viewer. Even now, when I view content now, I'll post a comment where I feel very confident about what I just, I witnessed something, I didn't like it maybe. And for the most part, I do just scroll, but sometimes I'll leave a comment and I'm like, this kind of bothers me that this would be an acceptable reality for XYZ. And then someone else will comment and completely change my mind, or like, I don't think you understood what was happening. And then I completely understood. And then I was like, oh, right, I'm going to delete this comment. Or I would feel a certain way. I would feel positively about what I watched. I'm like, yeah, I like that. And then I would scroll the comments and realize that there was a conversation about something that I would never have even have thought about. And then my cow brain is like, yeah, now I don't like that. You know what I mean? It's the mentality people have when they're viewing content is just different than the way that they process the rest of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Someone can watch a video on repeat. Someone can watch me talk for 30 seconds 50 times and then come to a conclusion after they've had this like weird meditative state around whatever I said. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the real world. So I fully expect there to always be opposition because people's brains just, the mechanisms move differently, when they're processing information like this. And it's something I forget. It's something I forget, that it's never going to be all gone because of the way people are on social media. It creates a new breed of person that only lasts during the time that the phone is on,
I think that's a really, really good point. How comfortable do you feel sharing like what your current like treatment or regimen looks like for how you're dealing with ADHD today in your life?
Yeah, that's fine. So I have a tic disorder. It hasn't really come out a lot here. I've been lucky. It happens. So tic disorder is kind of like Tourette's. There is a whole family of tic disorders. I have going somewhere with this.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Tic disorders is a whole category of motor and vocal tics. People know about Tourette's because they see people scream and cuss, and that's what they know. But there's all kinds of different ones like that, and it's classified differently based on how many you have and how often they occur, and do you have more vocal or more motor? So my face just does all kinds of weird stuff, and it's the things that cause my face to do weird stuff is lack of sleep, intake of any kind of stimulant, and stress. Which unfortunately I seem to find myself doing all three of those things frequently.
Yeah.
But knowing that if I were to take a stimulant, which is like by far the number one method for treating ADHD, my face would just hurt a lot because it would never end. There's no need to do that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have a history of substance abuse, so there's really just no need to do that. And I thought to myself, well, this kind of sucks. I don't know what I'm gonna do now.
Yeah.
And then I learned about off-label treatment with antidepressants, which do a lot of the same things. It's just not rapid release like a stimulant is. So I'm on an antidepressant, and it does help. I feel like everyone says you can tell someone has ADHD because it looks like they're driven by a motor.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are effectively treated, and I don't mean some random Joe Schmo that takes, an Adderall and is now on speed,
Yeah.
but when you're effectively treating ADHD, you do feel it's a different kind of motor. It's a motor of purpose with straight direction and no wig-wag deviation. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's what it felt like. It felt like I was like floating towards my goals and I was accomplishing things how I wanted to in a clear and concise way. I think there's some things that maybe suffer a little bit from medication. I tend to be slightly more irritable, but again, I think that you just balance that out with holistic approaches. Why am I irritable? Because I have too many sensory inputs right now. So I just need to deactivate some of them. So I do take an antidepressant, and then I do as many different things that help holistically as possible. Because what happened was I took the antidepressant and didn't do shit. I just sat around every day taking my antidepressant once a day, and I was like, man, I feel horrible. Work, damn you. Why isn't this working? I don't understand. And then, Matt Rakelboom, I've mentioned him a couple times. He's a very good friend of mine now. We've grown very close. He's an ADHD coach, and he just gave me so much advice about, he's like, you're just doing it wrong, man. You're just doing it wrong. He's like, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to function correctly. And just gave me all this great advice that was very helpful. So if somebody out there is looking to treat their ADHD, medication is not only viable, it's a fantastic option. Look into it. Talk to your doctors, see if it's something you want to do. But you can not take medication, do things holistically, and achieve up to 90% of the same result. It just requires more work, or you can do both at the same time. But ultimately, you have to do things differently in your life, which is how you would solve any other problem anyway.
Yeah. Once again, we see that combination of medication and action. It's like a person wanting to get in shape and just like taking a bunch of like pre-workout supplement or creatine,
Exactly.
but not working out and being like, how come I'm not getting shredded? It's like, well, you can't just like drink a creatine shake and
you're vibrating on the couch. You got to go do something, man.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. What would you say to anyone out there who thinks they might have ADHD? What would be your first steps or the process that they might want to look at?
The first thing I will say is imposter syndrome is a very real thing. It is the hardest obstacle that I had to overcome with ADHD. Imposter syndrome is where you are self-sabotaging. You tell yourself you don't have ADHD. Everybody else is right. You don't have it. You know, there's no reason for you to go get a diagnosis because you're a liar and you just want to be involved in something. And you're like, that's not true. Why am I thinking this? Because it's just a real thing that happens to people, especially with ADHD. I have imposter syndrome after, because I didn't pay $1,000 and go do a week study at a clinic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
your diagnosis isn't real enough, Dave, which again, ridiculous. That's something I have to block out on my own and treat. But just know you're going to have self-doubts that are going to come across as you being pragmatic and realistic. And it's not. You can treat this and you can seek out information. So ignore that would be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be to approach this calmly and organized. Write out a list of everything in your life, from the most extreme difficult things that you go through that might cause depressive episodes down to the small, funny, and quirky, like, oh, hey, I think that might be me too. That will help you get a better understanding for yourself. And when you go speak to a professional, you will feel confident that no matter where the conversation goes, you always have something to fall back on and say, this is a list of how it feels to be me. And you can read from that and tell them that and feel more confident, in getting a diagnosis. The next thing I would say is to check the DSM-5. I don't want it to be considered like a Bible. The DSM-5, it's a giant manual that reviews every neurological mental condition that we know of. So you can go look at ADHD in the DSM-5, this big, textbook basically, and it gives all the clinical definitions of what ADHD is. It's not perfect. It's ever growing. There's been 5 of them for a reason. So don't take it with a grain of salt because it's more of a reference for them, the professionals than you, but have your list of your own anecdotal stuff about how you feel. Check out the DSM-5 to see what you can learn and what you can know. Get as much information as you want. And when you go speak to your professional and you have your information and you feel confident, just be honest. Just be honest and tell them exactly how you feel. Tell them exactly what happens to you. Don't try and sell anything. You know what I mean? Don't try and seem extra ADHD, because what if you don't have it? You know what I mean? What if you have bipolar disorder? What if you have autism? You know what I mean? And you're wrong. You don't want to be misdiagnosed because you were afraid of getting an answer. I would rather get the correct answer every time than the answer that I wanted.
It's a really good point.
And you very well could have ADHD. So just be yourself, be honest, feel confident with the information you've collected about yourself and written down, and get your answers. If you don't like the answers you get, you can get second opinions. There's a reason that in my major city alone, there's like 40 psychologists and psychiatrists, because some are good and some are not. So if you feel comfortable with the answers that you got, that's great. Go get more. If you don't feel comfortable, get different ones.
Amazing. Where can people follow you, Dave?
TikTok is brave.dave. Instagram is brave.dave.official. And we have a podcast. It's the Brave Dave podcast on Spotify and Anchor.
Yes, the Brave Dave podcast, baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Well, hey, anything else you want to plug, talk about?
Oh, Austin, you were on the podcast. He was just on the podcast. Come listen to him.
I was on the podcast.
It was a great conversation.
Yeah. I listened to it. I liked the show. Thought you did a nice job with it.
Thanks.
Well, cool. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and I'm glad that we've been connecting lately, and I'm glad that we've exchanged podcast guestings.
Yeah.
And this was lovely talking with you. Thanks for giving me the time. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you out there on the
flip side, man.
Okay.
Leave me alone. I'm not that cool. All right, we're good to go.
Thanks, Dave.
See ya.
Bye-bye.